The Princess Bride by William Goldman. The year that Buttercup was born, the most beautiful woman in the world was a French scullery maid named Annette. When Buttercup was 15, Adela Tyrrell of Sussex on the Thames was easily the most beautiful creature. Buttercup, of course, at this time knew none of this. And if she had, would have found it totally unfathomable. How could someone care if she was the most beautiful woman in the world or not? What difference could it have made if you were only the third most beautiful, or the sixth? Buttercup at this time was nowhere near that high. She was barely in the top 20, and that was primarily based on potential. She hated to wash her face. She loathed the area behind her ears and was sick of combing her hair, and did so as little as possible. What Buttercup preferred above all else, really, was riding horses and torturing the farm boy. Shortly before Buttercup's 16th birthday, Buttercup realized that it had now been more than a month since any of the schoolgirls had spoken to her. She had never been close to girls, so the change was nothing sharp. At least before, there had been head nods exchanged when she rode through the village, but now for no reason there was nothing. A quick glance away as she approached, and that was all. Buttercup cornered Cornelia one morning at the blacksmith's and asked about the silence. "I should think after what you have done you'd have the courtesy not to pretend to ask," said Cornelia. "What have I done?" "What? You've stolen them!" And with that, Cornelia ran away. But Buttercup understood who the them was. The boys. The village boys. How could anybody accuse her of stealing them? Why would anybody want them anyways? What good were they? All they did was pester and vex and annoy. "Can I brush your horse, Buttercup? Can I go riding with you, Buttercup? You think you're too good for anybody, don't you, Buttercup?" When she was almost 17, a man in a carriage came to town and watched as she rode by for provisions. He was still there on her return, peering out. She paid him no mind, and indeed by himself he was not important. But he marked a turning point. Other men had gone out of their way to catch sight of her. Other men had ridden 20 miles for the privilege to do this, as this man had. The important thing here is that this was the first rich man, the first noble man to do so. And it was this man, whose name has been lost to antiquity, who mentioned Buttercup to the Count. The Count, and his considerably younger wife, had come to Buttercup's farm under the pretext of looking at Buttercup's father's cows, even though anybody for miles around would have told you that their cows were subpar at best. But the Count and the Countess weren't actually looking at the cows. The Count kept looking at Buttercup, and the Countess could not seem to stop looking at Wesley. And even though Buttercup would tell anybody who listened that she did not notice the Countess looking at Wesley, she did in fact notice. After they had left, Buttercup went to her room. She lay on her bed. She closed her eyes, and the Countess was staring at Wesley. Buttercup got up from her bed. She took off her clothes. She washed a little. She got into her nightgown. She slipped between the sheets, snuggled down, closed her eyes, and the Countess was still staring at Wesley. Buttercup threw back the sheets, opened her door, went to the sink by the stove, poured herself a cup of water, drank it down, poured another cup, rolled it the coolness across her forehead. The feverish feeling was still there. How feverish? She felt fine. She was 17 and not even a cavity. She dumped the water firmly into the sink, turned back, marched to her room, shut the door tight, went back to bed, closed her eyes, and the Countess was still staring at Wesley. Why? Why in the world would a woman in all of history of Florin, who was an always perfect, be interested in the farm boy? And there simply was no other way of explaining the look she was interested. Buttercup shut her eyes tight and studied the memory of the Countess. Clearly something about the farm boy had interested her. Facts were facts, but what? The farm boy had eyes like the sea before the storm. but who cared about eyes? And he had pale hair, if you like that sort of thing, and he was broad enough in the shoulders, but not all that much broader than the Count. And his skin was perfect and tan, but that came from slaving away all day in the sun. Who wouldn't be tan? And he wasn't that much taller than the Count either, although his stomach was flatter, but that was because the farm boy was younger. It must be his teeth. The farm boy did have good teeth. Give credit where credit was due. White and perfect, particularly set against Suntan's face. Could it have been anything else? The girls in the village followed the farm boy around a lot whenever he was making deliveries, but they were idiots. They would follow anything around. And the farm boy ignored them anyways, and it was probably for the best, because if he opened his mouth and talked to them, they would realize that that was all he had, good teeth. He was, after all, exceptionally stupid. It really was very strange that a woman as beautiful and slender as the Countess would be hung up on teeth that way. Buttercup shrugged. People were surprisingly complicated. But now she had a diagnosis deduced and clear. She closed her eyes and snuggled down and got all nice and comfortable. And people didn't look at the people the way the Countess looked at Wesley because of their teeth. She studied the memory again, and oh dear, now the farm boy was staring back at the Countess. He was feeding his cows, and his muscles rippled in the way that they always did under his tan skin, and Buttercup was watching as the farm boy looked for the first time deep into the Countess's eyes, and how could he? Oh, it was all right if he looked at her, but he wasn't looking at her, he was looking at her. And she was so old, the Countess would never see 30 again, and that was fact. And her dress looked ridiculous in the cowshed, and that was fact too. Ridiculous even before she got to the cowshed. The Countess looked rotten the minute she left her carriage, and her two big painted lips and her pinky little painted eyes and her painted skin and now it continued on like this for several more hours until about sunrise, when Buttercup finally set herself in her convictions and marched over to the hovel that the farm boy lived in and firmly knocked on his door. And when Wesley walked to open the door, she blurted, "I love you!" I know this might come as something of a surprise, since all I ever done is scorn you and degrade you and taunt you, but I have loved you for several hours now, and every second more. I thought an hour ago that I loved you more than any woman has ever loved a man, but a half an hour after that, I knew that what I had felt before was nothing, a puddle compared to the storms at high sea. You know your eyes are like that. Well, they are. How many minutes ago was I? 20? Had I brought my feelings up to then? It doesn't matter how much more than 20 minutes ago, that I cannot be comparison. There is no... I have loved you way more since you have opened the door to our hovel. There is no room for my body for anything but you. My arms love you, my ears adore you, my knees shake with blind affection for you. My mind begs you to ask it to do something so that it can obey. Do you want me to follow you for the rest of your days? I will do that. Do you want me to crawl? I will crawl. I will be quiet for you, or I will sing for you, or if you're hungry, let me bring you food, or if you have thirst and nothing will quench it but Arabian wine, I will go to Araby and bring you back a bottle for your supper, even though it is halfway across the world. Anything that there is that I can do for you, I will do for you. Anything that there is that I cannot do, I will learn to do. I know I cannot compete with the Countess in skills or wisdom or appeal. And I saw the way she looked at you, but please remember that she is old and has other interests, while I am 17, and for me there is only you. Dearest Wesley. I've never called you that, have I? Wesley, Wesley, darling Wesley, adored Wesley, sweet, loving Wesley. Please just whisper it that I have a chance to earn your love. And then Buttercup did the most brave thing that she had done that night. She looked Wesley right in the eye, and he closed the door in her face without a word.